Hello, everyone, and this is Robin Wilson. I am your host tonight on the Education Connection, and this is my first time to record an episode and upload it to YouTube. So I'm going to be trying this out. Stick with me for this episode tonight. So over the past several episodes, we've been exploring the science of reading, and we've talked about phonemic awareness, we've talked about phonics, we've talked about vocabulary fluency and comprehension. And so if you've not listened to my podcast, you can go to the Education Connection with Robin Wilson and you can catch up and go back and see what I'm talking about with all of the 5 parts of reading. And then I went into a series of 5 of the comprehension strategies once I got to comprehension, and we're to the end of that. And now I'm going to start talking about writing the comprehension strategies. So it's just one long procession as we go forward. And so we're going to begin a brand new series, like I said, today that naturally follows comprehension writing about reading. And I'm really excited about this episode tonight. So reading and writing are closely connected. In fact, one of the best ways to deepen comprehension is through writing. When students write about what they've read, they process, organize, and communicate their understanding in meaningful ways. As teachers, we've all experienced it. We've finished an amazing read aloud, close the book, and then wonder, now what should my students write? And sometimes we can come up with a complete different story that has nothing related to what we've done, but kids like connection and they like putting the things together and seeing how they're connected together. So sometimes we simply tell our students, okay, write about what you read in the story, or write about what we talked about. Write what your favorite part is. And sometimes they struggle with that, especially if they didn't understand the story. So that's a big task to ask a first grader. So sometimes we have to get very specific with the littles and asking them very explicitly what to write about so that they aren't left, what am I going to write about? On a side note, if one of the things I've learned, I didn't come up with this, but was in a literacy coaching that I went through, they said to tell your students, if you can say it, you can write it. And so actually I created a callback on that. So I'll say, shout out. So if someone says, I don't know what to write about, I will say, and I've already pre-taught this. So I'll say, if you can say it, and then they chant back to me, you can write it. And so literally I teach them, if you can say the words that you're wanting to say, you can write the words. I'm not looking at spelling. I'm not looking at structure of a sentence at that time. I just want them, the words to come out of their mouth to go down, and they can be phonetic spelling or any. So writing is going to be a little bit different than teaching spelling or teaching grammar. We're just going to let their creative thoughts flow onto that paper. So I found that writing becomes much more meaningful when students have a clear purpose. So I want to share a framework that has completely shaped the way I think about writing after reading. So there are 2 different kinds of writing about reading, and so but both are very important, and we don't want to leave either one out. Both belong in our classrooms, and they do serve different purposes. So the first way we're going to write, or we're going to talk about writing today, is understanding the story. So the first type of writing helps students demonstrate that they understand what they're reading. So this will be familiar. We're going to be asking them, write about the characters, or where did the story take place? What happened first, what happened in the middle, and what happened at the end. And obviously we're not going to write all of these things at once. These are just different prompts that we're going to be talking about. What was the problem? What is the solution? That was when I taught 3rd grade. That was a big one, problem and solution. But we want to introduce it even in 1st grade. What was the main idea? So you have to teach main idea before they can write about the main idea. And then, can you retell me the story? So tell me what happened in the story. Can you tell me beginning, middle, and end? So that's the foundation of comprehension. And yes, students do need to know that as well. So before students can think deeply about a story, they first need to understand what actually happened. And then you also have to know if they understand the story, because if they're not comprehending the story, then we need to focus more on that. So we'll have to go back to that a little bit more. But I'm talking about those kids that are understanding, they're comprehending, and then we're going to write about what we are reading. And a lot of times you'll find out who can understand the story and who is not understanding the story by the answers they give you in that comprehension response. So in first grade, it might look like drawing even, or labeling characters, sequence of events. Draw the characters and then label who they are. This was mom, this is dad. The characters in the story, this is the first little pig, the second little pig. And so they're going to write those out, sometimes just with the drawing it out, or retelling the story, describing the setting, writing simple sentences about problem and solution. So these are incredibly important skills because they build students' understanding of the text. And this is the kind of response to writing that you're going to see more than any other kind. So in your response to reading prompts, these are the actual kinds of responses that you're going to see a lot in your textbooks and things. And they're important. We do need to consider those things too. But I want to show you a little bit different way after you've done that, and maybe along with it, some of the ways you can also respond to writing. It's kind of exciting for me. We're going to spend time exploring foundational comprehension responses, so one at a time. So I am going to be doing episodes about each one of those, and I might even put a couple of them together that I just talked about. Those are the characters, the setting, the problem, the solution, main idea, and retelling the story, beginning, middle, and end, that kind of thing. So I'm going to be continuing on this series in that. And then I'm going to move into thinking about the story. And this is the one I love and that I'm the most excited about. Once students understand the story, we began inviting them to think more deeply. And this is where the fun begins. This is where we get excited about what we're reading and analyzing. So, and they can do it. First grade can do it. You just have to take them by the hand and kind of walk them into the comprehension tunnels and introduce them to that so that they can actually see what you're talking about and think a little bit deeper. And you can kind of see those little wheels turning sometimes when the students, when you ask them these sorts of questions. So here we go. This is what we're going to be diving into it'll be a little bit because I'm going to cover those first basic ones, and then we'll go into this one secondly. So once they understand the story, begin inviting them to think more deeply. So this is where I like to write about the comprehension strategies. Okay, so instead of simply asking students what happened, we're going to help them think like successful readers. For example, we're going to activate their background knowledge. We're going to ask them to write about what they already know about. And it can be anything in their life, or it can be about a book you're reading. So if you're reading a book about farms, we're going to ask them to write anything they know about farms. And if they don't know anything about farms, they don't have any experience of farms, then they can write about something that they did read in the book. But maybe they know that kittens are on a farm, that dogs are cows on a farm. And so for a first grader, just writing, I know dogs are on farms. That's acceptable. That's their background knowledge. That's what they know about. And so you can simply ask them, write what you know about ... whatever it is, birthday parties. And you really don't even have to have a book for this one. What do you know about corn? What do you know about apples if you're studying Johnny Appleseed? What do you know? And so you're going to ask them to write 1 to 3 sentences about what they already know. I love to give them incentives. So good, and show them good examples of writing first. And then, they can, if they write really good today, they're going to get an incentive on that. So what then you're going to move into connections. And so you're going to make a text to self connection. And then you're going to maybe compare a story to another book. That would be text to text, text to world. Wonder about something that's going on in the world that's related to what we are reading about right now. Write about something that, let's see, this one is visualization. So visualization is you're going to draw a picture about what you're visualizing, the story is about, and then you're going to write what you see in your picture. You're going to write about that. So I hope that makes sense. So visualization is when they don't see the picture and they draw a picture of it, but then they write about that picture that they drew. So underneath they might say, the dog is laying on the ground. So they would just give you a mental words for what they're seeing in their picture. I hope that makes sense. So that's visualization. And then they're going to make inferences about clues from the text. So and you really do have to almost spell this out for them. So what do we know, but the author didn't say? Well, we know the girl is sad because her grandmother left and she wanted to spend more time with her grandmother. And so maybe the words said she ran out to the car and she was asking grandmother to stay. And so we know from those words that she was sad that grandmother was leaving. And so that's inferencing. So you're always going to give it away. That's why I want to do an individual episode on each of these, because it's just too hard to explain in one. But you may realize their thinking changed from the beginning of the story. You might think that Cow was the one who was putting all the signs up, and maybe it was really Duck who was putting all the signs up, and you find that out at the end. That's synthesizing, and then we're going to write about that. So these writing responses aren't about recalling information. They're about communicating the thinking that's going on in the story. So as teachers, we aren't asking students to write random thoughts. We're giving them one specific target. And like I said, you kind of have to give it all away for them, and then they'll receive that, and then they'll be able to do it on their own. So when you're first starting to do this, you're kind of prompting them through it, because they don't understand unless you lead them by the hand through that as 6 years old. Now, as they turn 7 and getting closer to the end of the year, yes, you could say, we're going to write text-to-text connection. And I have these 2 books, The 3 Little Pigs, 2 different versions. What happened that's the same in both of these? So then they can literally start writing. Both stories had 3 pigs. So it might be very simple concepts, very simple thoughts, but they are connecting, and that's going to help them when they get to 2nd grade and beyond to connect some of those bigger thoughts. But right now we're just connecting the very basic ideas. What was different? Well, in one book, the wolf was eaten up or ran away, and the other one, he fell into the boiling water. And so they're able to make the differences there, the compare and contrast on those as well. So that would be text-to-text writing. So this focus helps 1st graders organize their ideas, communicate their understanding much more successfully. So both of these do matter, because I hate to say it, but the test, they do bring these up, and they really do need to know the setting. They really do need to know the characters. So that really matters, beginning, middle, and end. But the deeper thinking about writing is where the fun, I think it's fun. I think that's the fun part of it, because they're analyzing. You're teaching them very early to analyze books, and that comes in handy in those book clubs when you have discussions when you grow up and you go to college or whatever, or even if you don't go to college, if you're just wanting to discuss the books, the Wizard of Oz books compared to Wicked, the story, so how that would compare and how that would contrast. So sometimes teachers ask me which writing is more important. Well, they're both very important, and understanding the story and thinking about the story work together. Students need to understand the characters before they can infer how those characters feel. They need to understand the sequence of events before they can explain how their thinking changed. So you see why the first links to the second. They need to understand the story before they make meaningful connections. So one type of writing doesn't replace the other. I just want to talk about going a step further in your writing. So that's why you'll hear me talk about both throughout this series. And so this series is probably going to be at least 10 episodes or more long, because we're just going to dive deep into writing. And if you want to know more about writing, join me. So I'm going to begin looking at writing that helps students understand this story. We're going to be exploring the very basic character, setting, plot, events. And then we're also going to be exploring comprehension strategies and how to write to those comprehension strategies: background knowledge, connections, questioning, inferencing, visualization, synthesizing, and understanding their comprehension on those. So each episode is going to include practical classroom solutions, ideas, ways you can teach it, ways you can introduce this to your students, and simple ways to help your first graders become strong readers and writers. I hope you'll join me as we discover how writing can help students not only understand what they read, but also communicate the thinking that makes them lifelong readers. So before we wrap up today, I would like to leave you with the passage that has been speaking to my heart this week and just made me pause and think about my own life and all the things that I'm doing. And as teachers, we get really busy. So 1 Corinthians 13, 1 through 3, Paul reminds us that we can have knowledge, we can have gifts, we can accomplish great things, but without love, it all amounts to nothing. So as I look at my own life right now, I have so many things that I'm doing. I'm doing grocery list. I'm doing, Walmart order list. I have church responsibilities, taking my son to doctor's appointments, lessons to teach, emails, dinner to make, just like you, a house to clean, all the things. And somehow another list is waiting for me to start on tomorrow. But maybe your life feels a little bit like mine too. It's so easy to become focused on the to-dos, to do that, the things that we have to do, checking off our next task as we forget how we're doing it. So this week, God gently reminded me that everything I do must be done with love. Not just the big things, the ordinary things, the interruptions, the lessons that don't go as planned, the child who needs a little more encouragement. Teaching isn't just about covering standards or checking another day or another lesson off. It's about loving the children sitting in front of us. It's about caring for them and taking care of them as well. So comprehension strategies matter, writing matters, instructions matter, but according to 1 Corinthians 13, if those things aren't rooted in love, we miss the most important point. So this week, as you move from one responsibility to the next, I hope you'll join me in praying this simple prayer: Lord, help me do everything today with love. And so thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. If today's episode encouraged you, I'd love for you to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode in Writing About Reading series. And until next time, keep making learning meaningful, one child at a time. Bye-bye.